No tiene video, ¿verdad? Pregunta, ¿verdad? Hola, buenos días, ¿me escuchan? Hola, bueno, mi nombre es Iycw, tengo 24 años de edad, soy portuguesa, específicamente en Venezuela. Bueno, voy a compartir mi testimonio, ¿verdad?, acerca de mi trabajo informal. Bueno, ya como la mayoría conoce, lamentablemente mi país por una situación política y también económica muy difícil, el cual ha traído muchas consecuencias y principalmente a nosotros los jóvenes, ¿verdad? Uno de ellos, en cuanto al trabajo informal, ya que tanto el trabajo público, los sectarios, el cual ha dado como resultado de que era de buscar un trabajo, en este caso, como se mencionó, pues en el área pública los sueldos son muy precarios. Actualmente Venezuela tiene un sueldo de dólares mensuales. En la área privada, que el sueldo es un poco más elevado a comparación del público. Sin embargo, jóvenes se tienen que adaptar a unas características, ¿verdad?, que son muy, decir, muy favorable en cuanto a la explotación laboral, abuso, porque estas personas de empresas privadas lo que hacen es explotar a los jóvenes, cuando quieren, también las horas de trabajo que no son remuneradas. Entonces, esto ha traído que tengamos trabajos formales como son ventas en las calles, ventas en un caso particularmente, yo estudio en universidad en el año 2010, cual, como todas jóvenes, tuve muchas expectativas a la hora de iniciar mi digo que iba a estudiar, de verdad lo quiero, pero sin embargo, debido a las carencias que necesitamos nosotros los jóvenes, como está en la situación del país, viene a ser un empleo. Eh, Durante un tiempo, ¿verdad? Fue muy duro conseguir algún trabajo porque soy estudiante y la mayoría de los trabajos privados, porque lamentablemente públicos, la mayoría ya no está debido a lo que mencioné anteriormente. Entonces, me enfoqué en el área privada y fue con una compañera, las dos decidimos buscar empleo, también igual que yo, y nos vimos en una embajada, ¿verdad? Al cual nosotros nos dirigimos allá, llevamos nuestro currículo, tuvimos una entrevista de trabajo. Sin embargo, y debido a mi condición, porque yo estudiaba y estudio, eh, no lo pude ejecutar. Esto porque la empresa me exigía que debía cumplir horario completo, es decir, de mañana hasta la tarde. Sin embargo, yo traté de alternativas, ¿verdad? De las personas, qué posibilidades había de que me dieran un tiempo, yo posteriormente retomar lo que era el área de trabajo. Me usaron porque si yo solamente de un solo día me descontaban más de la mitad del sueldo si llegaba a ingresar a esa empresa. Entonces, lastimosamente no pude aceptarlo. Sin embargo, estaban allí, se molestó un poco debido a que me dijeron que porque iba a perder esa oportunidad, si sabía cómo estaba la situación. Eh, Principalmente eran mis estudios, que es lo que yo quiero lograr, ¿verdad? Pero no. Bueno, entonces de allí yo decidí buscar otras alternativas que, bueno, mi país no tuvo esa oportunidad de yo cubrir mis necesidades con un trabajo y con esas decidí con la venta informal en mi casa, viendo todo, empacar la comida, y eso a precios como precios solidarios, ¿verdad? Porque estoy en un entorno, o sea, yo vivo en un barrio donde también otros jóvenes tienen incluso hay unos que están. Entonces, las que yo vendía se tenían que ajustar a la realidad que yo estaba viviendo, es decir, era algo quizás no muy elevado al eso que yo necesitaba, sino que tenía que adaptar a esas características. Y bueno, actualmente yo estoy aquí, se encuentra en el ámbito educativo, ¿verdad? Venezuela atraviesa esta gran problemática a nivel tanto en área. A mí también me gusta enseñar a otras personas, dedico estos espacios libres, como tengo universidad, a dedicarme al trabajo de tareas dirigidas, donde asesoran de primaria, temática, inglés, básico y esto lo realizo en casa y es una situación que es algo informal y bueno, actualmente y esta es la situación que actualmente vivo. Bueno, gracias, espero que las situaciones.
Halo, ya, oke. Actually, it's good or not? Can you hear me now? Oh, everyone, can you hear me? Good. I think for now it's good. Okay. Kero, can I start for the testimony? Okay. Okay, let me know. Good night from the Indonesia for now. Hi everyone, I'm from the Indonesia. My name is Sani. Actually, for the testimony for the topic in this meeting, for the young worker in Indonesia, actually it's very high, very hard for now. Actually, in this month already come, young people already finished for the senior high school, and then too much people for the searching the work. And the beginning already come more than 3.5 million young people in Indonesia finish the senior high school. So too much young people searching for the work for now. And then for the capacity in the workers in Indonesia, it's very small. And then so too much people and too much young worker not uh, work now. So it's very difficult for Indonesia because the too much people and too much young worker needed to work, and for the workers or the job in it is very small. So in here very hard in Indonesia. Actually, for the searching for the job and the vendor for the young people in Indonesia, for now it's very little and very hard also. So we need to make some the project or another thing for this the problem. So the testimony for now, actually in Indonesia, it's too much young worker not work, and then needed to help us to searching the for job or another the activity. Actually, for the man is very good skill and everything there are have, but for the jobs it's low for now in Indonesia. But we say low because actually in Indonesia too much the people already want to work, the young people want to work, but the jobs still low. I think this testimony already enough, Kiro. Thanks.
Good day, ma'am. Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. My name is Emma Elizabeth Danyangwa. I'm from Namibia. Okay, ma'am. Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, it's better, but I'm in a warehouse. Okay, my testimony is that I was working for a company. It's a pet store. It's a clothing shop here in Namibia, whereby nepotism and favoritism was major role, playing a major role. So it's like we're treated unfair uh, because we are black. So I have been fighting injustice, whereby I have been hated by my managers and my superiors because I was the voice of others. Or let me say, I'm the fearless one. I was the fearless one. So I lost my job last year, August. So they have to dismiss me because of the misunderstanding we had with my manager. So I end up in the street for the past plus or minus 6 months. But I just want to say thank God. I am now employed again. So I'm now working. I started working in March, a refrigeration company, since I'm a graduate in finance. So yeah. But here in Namibia, unemployment is low. So there's young people here that are suffering. There's no job, whether you have your certificate or you don't have, or whether you go to school or you don't have. So here, unemployment is very real. So I think we just need maybe to come up with a project as young Namibians, young Christian workers, whereby maybe we can help our young unemployed youth. I think that is enough for today. Welcome, ma'am. Mhm, mhm.
Okay, thank you very much, Can you hear me all right? My name's Neil O'Higgins, and I work in the ILO's Employment Analysis Unit in Geneva, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm getting a strong echo. I don't know if there's people with microphone unmuted. Anyway, I'm going to talk about young people who are not in employment, education, and training. As we already heard, the issues facing young people seeking to get a decent job are many and various. In particular, there is low quality work when they are in employment, and then there is the access to employment in the first place. Now, we in the ILO suggest that it's not just unemployment per se, but as I say, there's a broader issue concerning access to obstacles facing particularly young women when they try to access the labour market per se. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Sorry. Yeah, I'll say a few words on this concept. What is this concept of young people not in employment, education, or training? Then I'll talk a little bit about some key trends and characteristics. And actually, it's rather different for young NEETs than compared to young unemployed. And then we'll look at some of the implications of what I said for policy. So just to say a few things. Young people who are not in employment, education, or training, well, in the first place, that is the indicator that we now use in the UN and in international organizations to measure progress in youth labor markets. So, and young NEETs comprise not just the people who are unemployed, that is young people who are actively searching for work, but also young people who are outside the labor force, but are not participating in education. If we look at globally, the size of this issue. As it stands, about 1 in 20, about 70 million young people are unemployed, but about 4 times that, about 1 in 4 young people, nearly 290 million young people are not in employment, education, or training. So when we start to look a bit more broadly, we see that the size of the problem is fairly substantial. And if we add to that of those who do find work, around 3 out of 4, 75%, are in informal employment, there really are substantial challenges facing young people. If we look at NEET rates, that is the share of young people who are not in employment, education, or training, we see that these are much higher in lower and lower middle income countries, particularly in Africa and in Southern Asia. But in general, NEET rates, in contrast to youth unemployment rates, and NEET rates tend to fall as country income grows. So actually in Europe, NEET rates are relatively low, and they are highest, as I say, in Southern Asia and in Africa, and also to some extent Latin America. If we look then at what it looks like, the relationship or the ratio between female to male NEET rates, we see that everywhere, high income, low income, middle income countries all share the characteristic that young women have higher NEET rates, higher share of NEET than young men. And the ratio of this, the NEET rate of women compared to the NEET rate of young men, is much the biggest divergences are found again in lower middle income countries, particularly again in Northern Africa in this case, and in Southern Asia. But everywhere, young women face higher and usually substantially higher NEET rates than young men. Moreover, the underlying factors behind NEET or determining NEET are somewhat different for young men and young women. So whereas for young men, male NEET rates are generally driven by the lack of availability of job opportunities. So it's mainly about unemployment or directly labor market related. Young female need rates are also due. They're also due to these factors, but young women also face a series of structural barriers entering advanced education and/or the labour market, and so their need is largely accounted for by young women who are so-called inactive. That is, they are not participating in employment nor in education. We also find that need rates are concentrated in rural as opposed to urban areas, and this is quite in contrast to youth unemployment. Rural areas have much higher need rates than urban areas, and this is particularly the case in low and low middle income countries, and as is the gender difference between need rates, which again is higher in rural areas. And moreover, we see that need status is concentrated amongst the least educated. So this is more the case in high income countries, but it is also true in low income countries too. Perhaps of most concern, NEET rates are persistent. So if I'm NEET today, I'm more likely to be NEET tomorrow. So we show this here with a little plot for young men and young women. What this shows is the NEET rates of 15 to 24-year-olds, the classical young person group, against NEET rates of 25 to 34-year-olds 10 years later. And this is done separately for young men and young women. What this shows is that NEET rates are persistent. If a country has high NEET rates now, or if I'm NEET today, in 10 years' time, I'm more likely to be NEET. And this is particularly the case for young women. So what are the implications of all this for policy and intervention? What can we do about it? Well, there needs to be, and there has been, a shift in, to some extent, in policy focus from youth unemployment to NEET, which broadens the scope of interventions and also implies a bit of a shift in mindset. As I mentioned at the outset, there are a lot more young NEETs than there are just young unemployed. Young unemployed is rather a small group of young people, relatively speaking. NEETs have rather different characteristics to the young unemployed. They tend to be, and in particular, NEET rates are higher for young women and more generally higher for more vulnerable groups of young people. We've heard quite a lot already today about the vulnerability of young people, and particularly young women. Looking at NEET rates really puts this to the forefront. NEET rates can be, of course, reduced by increasing youth employment, but also by encouraging a return to education. But more generally, there needs to be a greater policy focus on removing the obstacles to the entry to education and or employment of vulnerable groups, especially young women. Moreover, looking at NEET, so looking at young people who are not just those who are actively searching for work right now, raises the issue of outreach, reaching out to young people to encourage them, and young women in particular, encourage them to re-enter the labour market, and that's an important issue. Many so-called inactive NEETs would work if they could, but have given up looking due to the lack of adequate opportunities. So just to finish up, the key conclusions I would make is that facing the challenge of young people entry and re-entry into the labour market, facing the NEET challenge, in other words, requires a broad-based approach. Young NEETs often face multiple simultaneous barriers to employment, education and training. For example, attention needs to be paid to the various obstacles to education and labour force participation that young women face in differing national contexts. And we've already heard quite a bit about that already. And secondly, second key point I would make is that the fundamental cornerstone of interventions has to be macroeconomic and sectoral development policies introduced by countries in order to create sufficient job opportunities for young people. This can then be supported by active labour market programs, including training, subsidised employment and active job search, support, but one really needs to have a basis to create sufficient adequate employment opportunities. Otherwise, one has the situation facing many countries of widespread informality. But also taking into account, one needs to think in terms of outreach and, for example, removing obstacles. For example, there are numerous examples of access to providing supported access to childcare for young women to allow them to enter the labour market. And these, of course, would depend on local circumstances. A model that we are pushing a lot or discussing a lot and is being adopted also in middle-income countries are youth guarantee type programs, model on approach which admittedly comes from high-income countries, which has a number of elements which can support entry and re-entry and deal with a lot of the multiple barriers that young people and vulnerable young people face in entering the labour market. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, everyone, depending where you are. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's really an honor to represent Iycw in this afternoon. I know you are in Geneva right now, in Brussels, and it's a great thing to be here this afternoon in this virtual learning discussion. So, as a global network focused on empowering the working pool, especially women in the informal economy, Iycw strives to raise informal workers' voice and visibility. And we do that through strengthening organization and representation of the workers, improving the statistics and putting at the hands of the workers themselves to do effective advocacy for policy change, and expanding the different forms of knowledge and evidence on the informal economy. And in the context of the informal economy, we really working from the context where the informal economy is a diversified set of economic activities, enterprise, jobs, and workers that are not regulated or protected by the state. Our most recent studies, and I'm going to share here on the chat, we have done in two phases. We did in mid-2020 and then mid-2021. It's really taking into account the impact of the COVID-19 crisis in the informal economy, specifically the informal workers in 11 cities, focusing on 4 sectors. Street vendors, yes. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me better now? Okay. Oh, all right, wonderful. So I just shared in the chat our most recent studies And our global study was done in two phases, mid-2020 and mid-2021. I invite everyone to take a look at it. This study Iycw shares the findings from nearly 2,000 informal workers in 11 cities across regions, and I will share with you specific focusing on the women. But before that, I just want to say that it's really great that in recent years we have seen a renewed interest in the informal economy worldwide, and certainly as the COVID-19 pandemic hit, because as ILO has reported to us in 2018, 61% of all employment globally is the 61% of the global employment is within the informal economy. So I think this is very significant. And I'm so glad to see you all building this platform to focus on the youth. So with this renewed interest, it is in part attributed to the fact that there is a greater recognition of the integral linkages between informality and the informal economy. Today, we have also witnessed how the informal economy is a field of study on its own and draws from interdisciplinary lenses to better understand the heterogeneity of the informal economy, its size, the composition, what drives or causes the informality, and what linkages exist between informality and formality, growth or inequality, just to name a few. So for Iycw, supporting workers in the informal economy is really central to the broader objective of reducing poverty and inequality. And for women who tend to be concentrated in most of the precarious conditions of employment, the informal economy is a pathway for sustaining their livelihoods and also to exercise their agency. So it's pretty much working within what we have right now and still work for creating the conditions for women in informal employment to collectivize their voices, the visibility, the recognition, and exercise the agency and participate and be effectively involved in proposing policies that really respond, it's gender responsive and responds to their workers in conditions needs. So I will jump to really share with you a section of the research that we have, which really zoom in on the lives of women in formal economy, which was done by my colleagues who are the researchers on this research team. So this analysis, and I'm going to share with you some of the findings, was done by Ana Carolina Orgando, who was the COVID study research coordinator at Iycw, Guida Ismael, who was the study specialist, and Marcela Valdivia, who was the study officer. So the majority of the 61% we already mentioned here of the workforce is informally employed, as ILO released in 2018. In many developing countries, women are especially likely to be informally employed as in youth women as well, as your survey have highlighted, and also our colleague who spoke before from ILO. And those positions, the type of works that are available and women usually are performing are the ones that are often found in most vulnerable conditions with lower earnings in comparison to men. And this new research that we have done, it really shows how the pandemic has exacerbated women informal workers precarious employment conditions and the ability to work at all, which has increased unemployment, as some of you have already highlighted. So globally, women lost 46 million jobs, where men lost 57 million in 2020. In percentage terms, job losses were larger for women at 3.6% compared to 2.9% for men. The latest projections, which was done by Iycw, indicates that neither men nor women have recovered from their 2019 employment levels. Total jobs for women were approximately 90 million fewer in 2021 than in 2019. While this figure was 10.2 million for men in the same period of time, they were fewer in 2021 than in 2019. So basically, we clustered 3 reasons why this scenario and this disparity, this gap. First, women's employment dominates in sectors severely impacted by the crisis, from domestic workers, as some speakers already have noted, to wholesale and retail commerce, accommodation and food services, and some labor-intensive segments of manufacture, like the garments. The global supply chain was severely impacted by the COVID pandemic. The second reason is beyond the sector, women are overrepresented in formal or casual employment, making them cheaper and easier to be laid off or at risk of losing their livelihoods. So informality has also left women out of the radar of labor market policies, as they are ineligible for unemployment, for insurance benefits, or job preservation subsidies. And the third reason for this scenario of the situation of the lives of women in informal economy right now is also the measures like the closure of schools or restrictions to mobility exacerbated care demands within the households, which kind of, after the pandemic COVID, women got themselves stuck in that immediate conditions and situation that they had to fulfill. So it's overlasting, that overburdening of additional care demands within households that were mostly already, their responsibility to begin with, which forced women to extend their paid and unpaid hours to unsustainable levels, and cut down also on the paid working hours they have available and they can perform, and or leave employment altogether. So just for me not to forget to mention that 11 cities that were involved in this study that we have done includes Accra, Ahmedabad, Bangkok, Dakar, Delhi, Durban, Lima, Mexico City, Pleven, Bulgaria, New York City, and Tirapur. So we found that the pandemic had very diverse impacts on the workers in those 4 sectors: the domestic workers, home-based workers, women usually work in their home or in the adjacent of their homes, most of them working for the garment supply chain or footwear, arts and crafts, street vendors, market traders, and waste pickers, recyclers. And from that, women were particularly hit hard as a result of the intersection of the city levels restrictions, vulnerable working conditions that existed even prior to the pandemic. And also, of course, the gender norms and expectations on women, and also including younger women. So more specifically, I just want to share that in our findings, home-based workers, predominantly female-based sector in our sample, were the hardest hits of the 4 sectors that we go researches and works with. And by mid-2021, only recovered 2% of the pre-pandemic median earnings. This was mainly a result of the pandemic's disruption to local and global supply chains. Secondly, when we looked at domestic workers as a sector, predominantly also female-based sector, who were actively working and were still earning less than 3/4 of pre-pandemic median earnings in mid-2021, and 16% were still unable to work after the pandemic. For those working, many have reported deteriorating working conditions, more exploitation than you perceived, even the discrimination and the families blaming domestic workers for spreading COVID. I'm sure you read about this on the news. And 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 even though 16% were still unable to work, for those working, many have reported deteriorating their working conditions, including the less pay and longer hours of work when they returned to work when the pandemic starts to flexing the restrictions. In addition to all of that, they also were impacted severely to the mental health strains they suffered. And among waste pickers and street vendors, which were more gendered balance sectors in our sample, the street vendor sector and the waste picker sectors, actually, especially in the organizations that have been formed to be the voice and push for policies to protect the labor rights. It's very mixed. Those are mixed organizations, male and female, and by and large, the majority of the leadership is actually based on the male leaders. So in those 2 sectors, which were more gender balanced in our sample, the pandemic's adverse economic repercussions were often more pronounced for women working as waste pickers and as street vendors, believe it or not. And we did that in comparison to the male counterparts in the mid of 2021. So those are really the findings of the 2021 second 2 phase of the studies. And earnings among women waste pickers had recovered to 67% of pre-COVID median earnings by mid-2021, compared to 92% for men waste pickers. So you can see that the comparison. The male, they were able to recover 92%, and women were far behind with 67% by 2021. Women waste pickers also reported greater difficulty in accessing waste due to increased competition for recyclables and specific increases in occupational health and safety risks. So earnings among women street vendors, when we focus on the women street vendors, had recovered 55% of pre-COVID median earnings by mid-2021, compared to 70% for male street vendors. Women street vendors were more likely than their male counterparts to report that they had lack of capital constraints and the ability to work in the mid-2021. So we also looked at the ways in which unpaid care responsibilities impacted women's informal workers' ability to work in this time period, which it's it has extended, given to our very deep involvement with the global networks of all sectors. So more than 1/3 of women, which is 35%, in less than one quarter, 22% of men, reported that at least one care responsibility had reduced the ability to work or reduced the hours of work. And that has been lingering since after mid-2021. But to be very precisely with the research findings, it was exactly their lives and their picture scenario in 2021. Women reporting direct care increases were also working on average 3 days less than they were working in pre-COVID. So that's the scenario, and I just want to share that the interviews with the workers' leaders and the workers across the cities in our study also strongly highlighted the ways in which food insecurity increased difficulties to cover household expenditures, putting a lot of people more in debt, including the costs related to online homeschooling and assets depleting strategies such as borrowing money eroded any possibilities to reinvest in productive resources on their sustainabilities and means of living. So despite these devastating challenges, what we have seen and learned with the workers' organizations that we work with, and we have provided comprehensive relief, is that they have stepped in because they were already organized and they provided comprehensive relief and support to their workers and the members of the organizations. So I'm talking about associations, cooperatives, self-help groups, unions, etc. There is an opportunity at hand for policymakers to extend possibilities for dialogues and collaboration and really engage in a set of policies in this recovery period that's still lingering in many countries, which can be gender responsive and yeah, and ensure decent work and safer work conditions. So those are my sharings for this first discussion. I hope those have been helpful, and I'm complete.
Shall I go? So yeah, thanks for the question. So first of all, I'd say that the issue beyond just youth unemployment, there's a broader issue of general access to decent work. So it's complicated. I mean, there are a number of factors which contribute, but it's absolutely clear that the main reason why young people cannot find decent work is because there aren't enough decent jobs around. So they're either forced into informality, particularly where they have to find some job of some kind and or else they don't find anything at all. And this is particularly, as we've heard, this is particularly the case of young women. So the fundamental cause is lack of adequate job opportunities. So that means that countries, that economies need to generate more jobs. And we spend a lot of time trying to help countries trying to do that. But so it's not just a question of lack of skills, and there are also other attributes of young people themselves. Yeah, the second thing I'd say is that what the ILO is doing quite a lot of these days is supporting efforts to formalize the economy, so to make jobs better quality, basically by formalizing. And in Latin America in particular, over the last 10, 15 years, there has been a number of efforts, and informality, informal employment rates have actually gone down. But that requires concerted efforts, and there are ways to do this, but it's not. So the basic problem is lack of jobs. There's a tendency, I think, to no, I'll stop there. Thanks.
I have a cold and I'm having a cough moment right now. I don't really have anything to add. I think our colleague from ILO spoke. I think that yes, no, I think in relationship to the creation of jobs, has to be mindful of the creation of job within the decent work framework pillars, but also take into consideration the climate crisis that we are living at the moment, and also being responsive to the needs of the workers in informality. Uh, yeah, I think it has to be like a common ground there. That's all.
Uh, yes, Carol, I have the question. Actually, can I ask? Okay. Uh, yes. Actually, the Nail say it's too much. The young people is not have the like the capacity or the implementation for the work, right? And then too much also in Indonesia. After he have the skill, they we are making the like the workshop or the training for them, and then after that we need to how to after we train the young people, they have the skill and everything, and then the jobs is low, and we don't have the job. What we can do after that? Just you hear my point, Nel? Yeah, it's very difficult for us. if we have some training for the unemployment, of course for the young people, but after the training, they have the skill and everything, but the job it's cannot in here. So if I making the train, we needed to search the jobs also, right? For the yeah, after that we need to making something lah for the young workers. Thanks. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Neil.
That's just quickly. I mean, you make my point. This is the key point I've been trying to communicate, that the real problem is lack of adequate jobs. So even when one's trained, it's not enough to give training to young people if there aren't jobs around for them to do, or opportunities to start their own business. In a lot of countries, starting your own business is the only opportunity, and there are issues. So there are different levels in which you can act. One way is to try and support young people in starting their own business, facilitating access to finance and so on. But that can help. But again, this needs to have this background. So I guess one can. I mean, the real issue is the responsibility of governments, I would say, to create enough job opportunities to support economic development, so as to create. And this happens. This happens, but not enough. But there are different levels on which one can operate. So, but training itself is not enough. I agree absolutely. I guess, yeah. Okay, so the ILO does quite a lot on promoting the transition from informality to formality. I mean, it's clear from an ILO standpoint that informal employment is not a good thing. For a whole range of reasons, it tends not to be very good work, particularly for less educated people involved in it. For some lucky few who are relatively well educated, they can do okay with informal employment, but and can then move on to other. I think for the vast majority of young people who start in informal work, they stay there. There are the ILO supports initiatives to try and do something about that, and there are two basic sort of sides to that. One is the carrot and one is the stick. So providing, let's say, tax incentives and social security incentives for companies to join, to become formal, so to offer then formal employment or to formalize workers. On the other hand, enforcement is also key. Very often there's very little enforcement of labor legislation and these protections, and so that can also be strengthened. There are a series of interventions that can be adopted. What I can say, obviously, there's plenty more to be done. We haven't got very far with that, but I mean, or we haven't got nearly as far as but that progress has been made in the last couple of decades, and there is an ILO instrument which supports that, the recommendation on transition to the formal economy. So in principle, there are things which can be done. The issue is persuading the relevant actors to do that. But making formalization, making registration of business, making registration of self-employment easier can help. But there's basically both the carrot and the stick. So I 3 out of 4 young workers who actually find job in the world today are informal employed. So evidently there's a lot still left to do. But I mean, we're pointing in the right direction. Let's say, trying to point in the right direction.
It's spotty. I think I have one. I don't have the answer for the questions. I don't have the because that's the I I have a reaction to the comments because I don't necessarily have the answers to the questions because I think all the bet depends on the especially for the second question on the lack of a contract with the employer. It's precisely one of the areas of work we go down. Home-based workers, they all work. They are all either uh, uh, on account workers. The work is 100% for themselves. They are borrowing money, using their little resources to buy all the inputs for them to do the work they have to do to deliver. And then upon somebody's appraisal and decision if the quality of the work good or not, they get paid what they were promised. And sometimes they don't get paid at all. And because of the lack of contract, that's where their labor rights is totally uh, uh, at loss. There is nothing that, even though we have the Convention 177, the Convention on Homework. So yeah, I think the work is really to push for the country where you are in to ratify C-177. Because in C-177, there are some principles and recommendations there that then you can, nationally build a movement and push for implementation. But meanwhile, while there is no ratification of C-177, I think you can try to gather and organize with others in your situation so you come out of isolation and become visible. You can, find if there is some group of self-employed women organized where you are and try to start some strategy actions of how to assess the resources that you have and what are the windows there for you to try to push for some type of actions. Yeah, that's some of the insights that I can have to offer.
Yeah, so I'm aware that the road or the actions of an organization like the International Labour Organization or the instruments that it contains is a rather laborious and long-term um, way forward, but it is a basic way on which to base action, on which individuals and above all organizations can take action. What we do see quite a lot in some countries, in India, for example, and other countries, is informal workers can organize, and I'm sure maybe Katia has some. So we do. There is it's somewhat paradoxical in a way because informal workers are informal don't have formal contracts and so on, but in some sectors there are a number of examples of informal workers organizing in order to assert their rights and in order to bargain with prospective employers or to deal with also at the level of their government counterparts. It's these things are not easy and not immediate, but there are, as I say, there are different levels on which one can have recourse to, and one can make reference to the relevant conventions. I'm not familiar with the homework conventions that Katya referred to, but I put in the chat the ILO convention on formalization. But there are a whole range of these conventions which can be drawn upon, usually through organized groups, and so to take action. But I would, as we do in the ILO, I would suggest young people organize. That is the way to move forward. Yeah, thank you.
Esperen un ratito, estamos arreglando el problema del internet.
Yes, I heard someone briefly. Yes, 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 I hear you.
Okay, I really
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes? Okay, great. So it's a pleasure to join you today to present some of the work that the ILO is doing in terms of youth employment programming. It was super interesting to hear from the different country initiatives that Iycw has. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I think I was exposed to the different areas of work that you have in the different countries and looking forward to following that. So to tell you a little bit about, I will essentially be presenting some examples of ILO's interventions promoting more and better jobs for young people. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So before I go into speaking a little bit about the different ILO interventions, I just wanted to briefly introduce you to sort of the framework that anchors ILO's work on youth employment. So this is the ILO, the Plan of Action on Youth Employment that was adopted in 2020. And it follows a call for action on youth employment that was initially sort of adopted in 2012. And this really focuses on boosting, I can hear my own voice. Do you hear my voice twice? Okay, no, it's gone. So this really focuses on boosting a secure future of work for young people that is human-centered and in ensuring a pro-youth job recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. And so there are the 4 areas of work that were initially identified in 2012 in our call for action. And this sort of plan for action re-emphasizes those 5 areas of work that you can see on employment policies for youth employment, a focus on skilling and youth employability, labor market policies for youth, promoting youth entrepreneurship, and promoting and protecting rights for young people. And our work is then clustered across 3 areas with a focus on, of course, these 5 sort of pillars. Can I have the next slide, please? So the 3 pillars, the 3 sort of clusters that I mentioned is on knowledge, on technical assistance and capacity building, and on advocacy and partnerships. And of course, in this presentation, I will be focusing more on the technical assistance and capacity building. So looking at essentially projects and programs that support youth employment. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first example that I wanted to share with you is the job search clubs. So the job search clubs is essentially an ILO model or an intervention that we implement which supports young people in their job search journey. So it's a 2-week intensive intervention supporting young people to navigate the job market and equip them with the ability to effectively search for a job. It also an interesting element of this is also that there is a peer-to-peer support element, which means that in addition to young people being supported in searching for their jobs by an ILO experienced facilitator, there is also an element of young people helping each other. So a very important aspect is this sort of peer-to-peer support and connection that is built that ensures that young people get the support, of course, from a facilitator, but also from each other. So they encourage each other through the job search journey, creating a support network. And here we use a very specific ILO methodology to support young people in searching for a job. And this intervention helps young people get a better understanding of the job market and also of, say, successful ways of looking for a job, how to write a CV, how to, successfully give job interviews. I can again hear an echo. I don't know if you hear my voice twice. I don't know if there's somebody not on mute. Okay. Okay, great. I'll try and not let it's distracting because I hear my voice, but you let me know if something's unclear. Okay. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so to tell you a little bit of the key characteristics of the job search clubs, usually it's an intensive intervention where young people meet daily for 2 weeks. And there is a experienced ILO trained facilitator that essentially, manages these 2 week job search clubs and provides young people with that support. Usually there are about 12 young job seekers in each club. And like I was mentioning, young people get the support to look for jobs, and this is specifically targeted towards more disadvantaged young people. So currently, we're implementing this in the context of forced displacement. So it's targeting young refugees and young people in a forced displacement context. And so it really is targeted towards vulnerable young people who have been long-term unemployed or detached from the labor market. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so to tell you quickly about how this is implemented, or the modality of implementing this intervention, we identify facilitators, and usually this is facilitators that have an institutional anchor in the country. So, for example, with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, in some countries with the Ministry of Labor. So we have national stakeholders that are trained as facilitators to ensure sustainability. So they're identified and then trained. And then they're trained with the ILO job search club methodology. So there is a specific methodology that has been developed that really focuses on behavioral change of job seekers. And so once facilitators are trained in this modality, they then identify who could be the beneficiary, so who could be the job search club members. And this is done, there is a very high effort in terms of profiling who the potential job seekers could be. So identifying really those that need support, those that have been, detached from the labor market, as I was mentioning. And once they have, and the method for sort of identifying this is they reach out to young people, obviously, in their communities, either through social media or to the communities. And once they do that, there is the rolling out of the program itself, where they meet for 2 weeks and receive that support. And maybe to quickly mention the key role of facilitators in this regard, because the success of a job search club really depends on the facilitation techniques and the work that the facilitators do in supporting the young people. And we have several facilitation techniques that have been proved to be successful in supporting the young people. We also have a buddy system that we develop where young people, they're paired in pairs where one supports the other through their job search journey. And like I was mentioning, we're currently implementing or have implemented in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Uganda, all in the context of forced displacement. So really targeted towards this population. But of course, this can be rolled out to young people in general. This is just an example of what we have been rolling out. And usually after 3 months of the delivery of the job search clubs, there is a little bit of a tracing to see what has been the success rate of young people who have undergone this program in terms of accessing jobs. Can I have the next slide, please? So that was a little bit about how young people can access wage employment, So how ILO has been supporting young people access opportunities for wage employment. And now I want to talk to you about another example, which is the Youth to Youth funds. And this is an example of promoting more self-employment and entrepreneurship among young people. So the Youth to Youth Fund is essentially a competitive grant scheme where youth-led organizations, they receive financial, but also more importantly, technical support in piloting their innovative ideas that create jobs for their peers. So they receive support such as business development services, entrepreneurship, support services to pilot their ideas in a way that can create jobs for other young people. Can we have the next slide? So the Youth to Youth Fund approach is, to tell you a little bit about it, is that young people through youth-led organizations, so the support is provided to youth-led organizations who then in turn support young people. So the young youth-led organizations are encouraged to identify innovative ideas. And based on shortlisted ideas, the ILO provides support in, refining and fine-tuning those ideas. So providing them with the technical assistance to make those ideas better, to improve them, to sort of be able to clearly identify how those ideas can contribute to job creation among other young people. And then we provide support in testing and piloting those ideas. So that is both financial support, but also, as I was mentioning, technical assistance to be able to test those ideas. And essentially, the logic here is that young people are then supported to lead change in their communities, but also to act as job creators for their peers. And the next slide, please. So a key characteristic, of course, that sets the Youth to Youth Fund, apart from other sort of interventions, is that it's not just about financial support. It's a very much comprehensive approach that combines multiple components, which includes, providing this technical assistance. So providing them with the training and the capacity building to be able to utilize that sort of seed funding to implement innovative interventions that create decent jobs for their peers. And it's also a very holistic approach in the sense that the multiple actors involved in this intervention, for example, social partners or our implementing partners, are also capacitated in a way that they can sustain the impact or the progress of this intervention beyond the life cycle. And currently, we are piloting this intervention in forcibly displaced contexts for the first time in Ethiopia and Uganda. So instead of youth-led organizations, we are working with refugee youth-led organizations in a way that they can create jobs for their communities. The next slide, please. Okay, and the last example I wanted to provide you with is actually not a program, but I thought this might be interesting to this audience and to all of you because it's a guide on youth rights at work. So this is the Workwise Youth Guide that we launched earlier this year, and it is intended to support ILO constituents, youth-led organizations, essentially any organization or entity interested in raising young people's awareness of their rights. So this guide is for young people in general, but has sort of dedicated sections on forcibly displaced youth. And it covers the whole extent of topics, including, say, social protection entitlements, conditions of work, non-discrimination, a safe and healthy work environment. And it is divided into 3 sections. I'll quickly touch upon that afterwards. But so this is a global guide, and it is currently being contextualized to Iraq. And we've really been contextualizing it by meaningfully engaging young people. So close to 200 young people have been consulted, and really, it's been a very participatory approach to developing the localized guide in Iraq. I have the link here so you can check out the guide at your convenience. Can I have the next slide? Okay, I'm probably a few minutes above time, so let me quickly just tell you the structure of the guide because there are 3 sections. There's the guide itself, which sort of provides information on the particular topics and themes that we discussed, including session plans and practical guidelines on introducing those rights. Then there's a toolkit which helps facilitators sort of design the training session. So it has, case studies, exercises, and guidance for facilitators to run training sessions. And then there's the annexes that provide sort of supplementary information in terms of what are, say, ILO standards that exist, labor standards that exist that guide the rights in different areas, as well as guidance for facilitators to localize this to the country context. The next slide, please. So this global training package should be tailored to the country context. So in any country that you would like to roll out this guide, and of course this is available to anybody to use, no? So it's open source, it's available for everyone to use in their own work. It can be used as a module in some of your maybe training offerings in general, but the first step is to obviously translate it to the local language, tailor it to the country's policies. So of course this is global, but in each country there are national laws and policies that govern rights. So it needs to be, of course, tailored and then adapted to the national context. It can also be adapted as per your needs. So in some countries, for example, they wanted to include special provisions for migrant labor, or specific provisions for particular types of workers, for example. And that can also, of course, be done. Next slide. And this is the last slide, I promise, but there are also other ways of adopting the guide. It can be through campaign materials. So in the past, for example, the guide has been used to develop an advocacy campaign in Indonesia, for example, where they had just campaign materials to increase young people's awareness of their rights at work. It's been gamified, for example, in Moldova and Northern Macedonia, where they developed an app, as well as an online website for young people could learn about their rights. I'll leave it at that. There are some other examples, and I'm happy to kind of share them with you. But these are some examples from ILO's work in implementing youth employment programs and tackling with the youth employment challenge. Thank you very much.
Okay, hi again, and thank you so much for the invitation and for us to be here with you. I'm going to share with you Uyghur's Gender and Waste Project, which is it's an effort, an example that takes place. It was a pilot initiated in Belo Horizonte, and since its inception, 2011, a couple of other countries have it picked up, but the focus is pretty much to initially to analyze and give the tools for the women waste pickers to raise their voice and effective participation, decision making in their cooperatives and the national movement. Especially because in the solid waste management and waste picking sector in general, women faces many challenges accessing recyclable with the highest value among many other challenges. It's a multi-faceted issue because the movement, the sector is very mixed. It's historically led by the male waste pickers, So we work a lot on the women's organizing and leadership building for them to really build their own agenda and bring the specific needs from the lens, from the gender lens, right? Such as, for instance, it took them a long time to bring to the agenda of the movement the need to create childcare, for instance, which is one major challenge for women to be out of the work market, informal or informal at this point, right? So I just wanted to share perhaps a video first, and then I share a couple of more insights and learning lessons of the project. Do you think I can share my screen with you to share the video? It's on YouTube. Okay. How how do I do that? All right. Okay. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Yeah, because I have um I'm gonna send the one we have a several version, the 5 minutes version. Uh, yes, why cup? For some reason, I'm not able to paste here on the chat. Okay, so
Olá, Marinete. Talvez você me conheça da... Eu sou uma... Olá, tudo bem? Eu sou a Marinete. Talvez você já me conheça das cartilhas. Eu sou uma catadora do Brasil. Eu vou contar para vocês um pouco sobre as Bonitas, um grupo de mulheres mineiras que, ao longo dos anos, resolveu se juntar, se capacitar e produzir um plano de ação para questões de gênero. Nós, mulheres, não voz ativa, uma fala, às vezes, quando sabe de alguma atividade, debate, nós, em 2012, as instituições contrataram o tema de uma... Então, se juntaram para o colaborativo para fortalecer lideranças e colocar a discussão da vida. Esse projeto é gestão participativa forte essa questão de atuar no coletivo e no plano individual. E todo esse processo gerou a produção da cartilha Mulheres Catadoras, um marco muito importante nesse trajeto. Foi lançado em abril de 2020, lideranças femininas e da América Latina.
Um tempo tratado a taxa que foi chamada, eu acho que é sim, da mulher sabe.
Depois das oficinas de licitação, para elaboração. E isso aconteceu em meados de 2020, bem no meio da pandemia. Então, tivemos que nos adaptar e aprender a conversar e nos reunir pela janelinha do mundo virtual. E a gente viu que a gente poderia, né, um formato onde elas têm o uso dessas ferramentas novas, e a gente poderia o processo de planejamento. Boa noite a todas as bonitas. O grupo topou esse desafio, tiramos as reuniões em mais que 1h30. E, ao longo da semana, que faziam para casos de gênero, elas estavam.
Agora, a Valdete, para que a gente consegue fazer essa ação. Empoderamento, para que trabalhadores reconheçam do trabalho. Coloca, Júlio.
Saiu ao final desse processo, e em dezembro a gente já estava com o plano de ação todo elaborado, com ações locais, na base, nas suas cooperativas, ações no estado de Minas Gerais, focado no movimento dentro do nosso estado, ações com a nacional do movimento, ou seja, para fora do estado, com a coordenação nacional, outros núcleos do estados, ações com outros movimentos sociais, porque essa é uma preocupação, ações também formativas e ações com catadoras autônomas.
A gente está conseguindo todo mundo, o do gênero, precisa avançar, constrói isso junto, cresce junto. Acabei passando aqui por algumas catadoras da comunidade onde que eu moro e bateu muito na realidade dela. A gente está bombando, viu, com o nosso plano de ação e fazendo ele até sem sentir.
Vamos falar aqui de coisas que aprendemos de gênero. Primeiro, que foi importante realizar essas conversas em locais somente com mulheres.
Método participativo de educação popular na arte de mobilizar são essenciais.
Manter a comunicação é fundamental.
Precisamos pensar em processo contínuo.
E, principalmente, ação, com reuniões, capacitações, por aí vai.
Mas tem o compromisso de colocar o plano de ação em prática. Recapitulando para você, bonita que está nos vendo. Você começa aí na sua associação com um núcleozinho de mulheres, vai juntando mais até ter coragem de chegar nos homens. O importante é juntar os companheiros da luta pela igualdade.
Ninguém largando a ninguém.
Sempre com
E solidariedade.
Contamos com você.
com você.
Contamos.
Okay, thanks for watching. So as you see, the project is now it has a very strong country of the speakers, women. I'm sorry. So as you see, the group is intergenerational. Some of the speakers, they are second generation. They joined the project in 2011, they were 15, 16 years old. Now they are 25. their 20s. And we also have older waste speakers. So it's intergenerational. And what we really did was really to provide with women waste speakers across the generations with the tools to work towards equality in the workplace, and also have the safety space and have the camaraderie and create that environment where they can also share their personal lives in order to strengthen the capacity and voice, not only their individual empowerment and realize their own self as a source of power and the collective power as a women within the larger movement. To really set the agenda and put in the agenda their priorities, the strategic priorities, and the needs. Also, the focus of the project was to increase their leadership and roles within the organization, which also spilled over not just even local but even national, because there's partnership with the national speakers movement in Brazil. Several of those leaders from different associations and cooperatives, and they are also member of the regional network in Red Lock, and they are member now of the International Alliance of Waste Speakers, which we just launched in Buenos Aires on May 2nd. And the third aim was to contribute to the economic and political, development, and create the conditions for them to tap into their own source of power and sustain their livelihoods and be an active waste speaker in their organizations, and have a meaningful participation and insert themselves in the decision making of the movement and represent the movement as well. And we did that involving the women in all phases. It was a pilot, it was a action participatory research. They really learned with the process of facilitating, of applying the tools to do the assessment and identify the strategic needs, the priorities, and etc., to develop their own agenda, engage with multiple partners and expertise to create that collegiality in the coordination. We had several educational workshops locally and also regional to cross-fertilize and cross-learning with other countries. We did also with some other countries in Latin America. We even did with South Africa, with speakers, women in South Africa, and to produce input, several key resources and gender tools where they continue to use, and they have done the multiplier effect because many of them have become facilitators and have become the seed of what they call the nucleus, and start other groups for other women to go through their own process of doing that analysis of their place of work, their place of living and being, from the different identities that they have and the different needs they have of their work and their lives. So I think I stop here, and I'm going to put in the chat a beautiful blog that Jennifer, one of the waste speakers, she began this process in 2011 when she was 16, and now she's 25. She's one of the key political leaders of the movement, presenting them in several forums where they do a lot of negotiation, because in Brazil they are formally inserted in the waste management of the city, and most of their cooperatives are really a good source of income for their livelihoods and for the families. So I will stop here, and I'm open for questions, for clarity, anything else that is needed.
Sure. I just was wondering if we take questions altogether or one-on-one. So on the social and solidarity economy, I have to say that we have colleagues that focus specifically on social and solidarity economy. At the moment, with the youth employment team, there isn't that much of a focus per se on social and solidarity economy. And I would be happy to, of course, connect you with our colleagues that focus exclusively on that area of work to be able to tell you a little bit more about the work that they're doing on the social and solidarity economy. What I could share a little bit in terms of, I guess, not social and solidarity specifically, but on I guess, nature-based solutions that sort of focus on employment. We had a report actually that was published, I want to say 2 years ago, and that sort of capture some of the learnings as well as interventions that are working, and I can link that and share that with you as well. But I'd be happy to connect you with our colleagues that work focus specifically on SSE. Sure. Thank you, Basma. I didn't put any of the numbers on the slides actually, because I guess we have different numbers from different countries, and I was focusing more on sort of the methodology and the story behind each of the interventions and how we do it. But of course, I can share some numbers with you, but I can tell you a little bit how we're doing it. So for the Job Search Club, specifically in Egypt, we've worked with Caritas. So that's our implementing partner supporting the job search clubs in Egypt with a focus on displaced youth. No, so that's what I was telling you, that for these interventions, the focus has been on young refugees and young people also from host communities. So, but of course, this job search clubs can be implemented for for young people in general. But obviously, this was done under the context of a project where the focus has been on forcibly displaced youth. So the way it's implemented is essentially we first train. So there is a master trainer that trains facilitators. So these facilitators are from national sort of stakeholders. So in Egypt, I believe they worked with Ministry of Youth and Sports, if I'm not mistaken. But they work essentially with sort of stakeholders that can take this forward. No, so they're trained. So after the project, they already have stakeholders that are trained in these that can give continuity to the work. So once the facilitators are trained, it's these facilitators. Then Caritas implements the 2-week job search clubs where the facilitators that are trained are used as facilitators. So it's implemented by our implementing partner Caritas. They use the facilitators to bring 16 young people per job search club. So in different governorates, they have a 2-week job search club where during the 2 weeks, the sort of support is provided to these young people. So the facilitators kind of walk these young people through sort of CV writing or how to do successful job interviews, how to fill up an online job application, how to develop some of their soft skills, no? So how can they improve their presentation skills, their communication skills, their teamwork skills by supporting some other young people. So during this 2-week intensive period, young people go through this sort of club And they also provide support to each other. So there are other young people who are also in the same job search journey. And the idea is that they encourage each other or kind of share their experiences with each other to learn from each other and continue to maintain this support network. Because obviously not all of them get jobs immediately, like it's not, some people maybe get jobs after the 2-week training, maybe during the 2-week training, others get it in say a month or two. But the idea is to keep this network of young people that can support each other. For example, through a WhatsApp group where people sort of share updates of their job search journey or of say jobs that they become familiar with because of their search. And so that is sort of a little bit about the job search clubs. And in terms of specific, I think we have figures as of maybe 2022, end of 2022. And I can share with you the exact figures, but usually it's between 40 to 50% of those that go through the job search clubs that are able to then find jobs after the 2-week period. So it's quite a significant, I guess, percentage. We just finished the implementation in Uganda, where we saw about 40%. So I think there were, I think, 100 young people that had gone through the process, the entire process, because some people, of course, drop out in the middle. So we count those that really stay till the 2 weeks. And about 40 of them were able to find jobs. And this is only immediately after, perhaps in 3 months, when they do a tracer study to see, how many of those that went through the job search clubs are able to find jobs. Say after 3 months after the period of support, there may be more people. I hope that answers your question. Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I didn't understand. The third question was on what are the skills the young people have, right? Is that the question? And there's a second part to the question, I think, that I missed. Got you. Okay, noted. Okay, thank you. Yes, I think an important question. So I think currently, maybe I go one by one on the question. So on where in Latin America can these clubs be found? So currently we haven't implemented actually in Latin America. So the countries that we have implemented in so far, piloted or even sort of implemented, at least to the best of my knowledge, I don't think we have implemented yet in Latin America. And of course, if there are opportunities to, that would be great, no, to expand our work. But so far, we've only implemented in Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Uganda, and Kenya. So, and then profile of the candidates. Yes. So usually, I mean, in the context that we have implemented, which is in context where they are, forcibly displaced youth, these are largely young people who have really, these are people who have had who have been unemployed for at least a year and have been detached. So they have been actively searching or haven't been able to find a job. Of course, the profile is, of course, of young people who have a certain level of education to be able to fill in job profiles. So of course we of course the support that is provided, for example, is not, say, a literacy program. So they have to be have at least the basic qualifications to be able to write their CV, to be able to. So it's not necessarily uneducated young people. It's largely young people who have a profile of having at least a minimum level of education, who are actively sort of applying for jobs. You have to keep in mind that in the context where we are looking at it, for example, in forcibly displaced contexts, a lot of them are informally employed. And it's not because they don't have the competencies, the skills, or the education. A lot of the time it's because in the countries where they are being hosted, a lot of their, say, educational requirements, they're not recognized because they're coming from a different country where they had, say, these qualifications that, say, are not recognized in the country that they've now moved to. Another reason is administrative barriers. They don't have the necessary documentation to be able to access the formal employment market. So while, of course, the job search clubs does not tackle with the policy challenges of changing sort of the environment in terms of recognition of refugees' right to work. And a lot of the countries, actually, refugees have the legal right to work, which is why the job search clubs exist there, to be able to facilitate still the transition. So they have legally the right to work, but many a times that's not implemented, in the sense that there's still administrative procedures to overcome. So the job search clubs then sort of supports them in being able to gain the skills to access those jobs. You asked about the gender dimension of it, and like I was saying, the facilitators play a very important role in making sure that, because obviously for young women, particularly in these situations, they sometimes are a bit hesitant to or shy to be able to participate effectively in bigger groups because of the cultural context, also because of the gender barriers they face in terms of participating effectively in the sort of job search clubs. So the facilitator needs to ensure that the facilitation techniques that they use are inclusive. They also, when they're choosing the members of the job search clubs, we make it a point to ensure that there is a intentional focus on ensuring young women are included, and that we take an inclusive approach to selecting the members of the job search clubs. In terms of what profile employers are looking for, so one thing that the job search clubs does is also evaluate the members. So the young people that become members of the clubs, they evaluate the profile of these members, and also linked to some of the other ILO work that we're doing. So we, of course, do a mapping and labor market assessments to really understand what are the viable sectors in that area, which helps us link to what are the job opportunities that are available. So if we see that, a booming sort of sector is maybe agriculture or the green economy, then that is sort of incorporated in the job search clubs. So for example, in some job search clubs, they've incorporated green jobs and green skills, keeping in mind the requirements of employers in the region or in the area to absorb the young people that go through the job search clubs. But in general, I think the focus for the ILO is ensuring that young people, in addition to having sort of the technical skills, one thing we say that employers are also looking for soft skills, and something that the job search clubs really helps own, because of the ILO, we say that the core skills or the transferable skills are also important for employers. So these are things like collaboration, teamwork, communication skills. And I think the job search really helps sort of develop those skills just by what I was saying, the peer-to-peer support, as well as the support that the facilitators provide in helping young people, for example, give interviews, write CVs, help each other. So it's a way of developing some of those soft skills skills that then employers seek as well. Thank you. Do you want me to take the question in the chat first? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Great. So these programs are actually implemented in the framework of a project, no? So for example, we currently have an ongoing project that is funded by the government of the Netherlands that focuses on these countries, and hence that gives us an opportunity to implement these clubs. So if there is an opportunity, so that's why these clubs are obviously implemented in some countries and not all. Currently, I don't think in Ecuador we're implementing it. But usually if these were something that is being implemented, then, you know, we disseminate it, we sort of share it widely through our networks to make young people aware of the availability of this program. So that's how it usually works. And like I was saying, this is just an example of how we're implementing it in the context of forced displacement, but it can be implemented for not for young people in general. No, it's just in this particular case, it's tailored to these young people. But in the past, for example, it was many years ago, it was implemented in Egypt, which was for young people in general. So currently, we don't have it in Ecuador, and of course, if there are any opportunities to incorporate it in any work that you see, we would be happy to do so. It's just currently it's not being done in Ecuador. And then on the question on, I think on West Africa and Ghana, so we do have an office in Abuja that covers Ghana, because for ILO we sometimes have some offices that cover multiple countries. So the office in Abuja covers Ghana, and they have in the past we've worked on youth employment with that office. So they would be the best entry point to essentially learn a little bit more about the work that is that is happening on youth employment in the region. I don't think again that the job search clubs or some of the interventions I mentioned are currently being implemented in Ghana. But the best way to be up to date with the ILO programs, youth employment programs that are being implemented in the region, is through sort of following our work in the country that happens through the office in Abuja. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.